Hey, welcome to Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today, and just like any other time, we have another amazing show for y'all today. Man, today we have a true honor talking to Matt Taylor. He's going to share with us not just about strength training, but the topic of today is how power lifting can help you to find your strongest self. He has a main story that we're going to dive into, but we're going to first know a little bit about him, what his focus is on, and helping lifters. So first and foremost, I want to welcome Matt to the show. Say, hey, how you doing, man?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you being on today, man. So when it comes to you helping others achieve their personal records, you call them the PRs. Kind of tell us a little bit of your backstory being an athlete.
So as an athlete, I didn't really hit my stride until I found powerlifting. Ultimately, I was actually I was not good. My parents put me in all the sports growing up, baseball, soccer. I'd done some judo for a while, and just, season on each of them, never got along with anything, and took a bit of time off from it by the time I was, 10, 11, something along those lines. And I got into powerlifting in a bit of a roundabout way, in that I had this one gym class that stands out to me. I was in grade 8 at the time. And, we were doing, I forget what they're called, but like the wind sprints, where you got to go to like the other end and back, and then you do 2 of them and then 3 of them. There's like the ladder for it. And I tapped out pretty early, but I've been doing some running and stuff lately just for like something to do. And my gym teacher came up to me, and the only part of the conversation I remember is how he started. He said, "Hey, Matt, you're pretty obviously not in the best shape of your life right now." And like I said, I don't remember the rest of it, but I just remember just seeing red and being like, what are you talking about, man? Like, I've been trying. I'm really busting my ass here. And so I went home that day and literally just Googled, how to get jacked without getting fat, and found a bodybuilding routine, because in my 12-year-old brain, the solution was, I just gotta get jacked. Like, I gotta show this guy, and very quickly found out, started lifting the next day, very quickly found out, working at the local YMCA, I just didn't actually care that much about, once I cooled down, I didn't really care all that much about getting jacked, but the feeling of getting stronger and seeing this quantifiable increase on, like, you're getting better at this thing, and it's a physical pursuit, was never something I'd really felt before. It always felt like I was kind of spinning my wheels or waiting for somebody to pass me the ball, and it just felt really good. And then you fast forward a couple of years, in talking with some of the regulars at the gym there, it turned out, squat, bench, and deadlift is a pretty big part of a lot of people's routine. There's a sport that revolves around doing as much as you can on those. And I said, hey, I really like getting stronger with this stuff. Let's give it a shot. And so I signed up for my first meet. I had a horrible time. And stubborn enough, though, where I was like, you know what, there's something here. This feels like it was my problem, not a problem with the sport. And, fast forward a few more years, I'd set a national squat record. Another year later, I actually won my division in Worlds in powerlifting. And that same year, in 2014, I started coaching powerlifting as my full time. And that kind of puts us here. 10 years
Once again, you're listening and watching us online on Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Matt Taylor. Go to his website, strongerupt.com. And we're talking about a topic, how powerlifting can help you find your strongest self. You left off moments ago about you went into division in the 2014 Powerlifting World Championship. Being able to have that accomplishment and many other ones, it's a journey. But I love what you said about when you were struggling in the beginning. It wasn't that it was a problem with the sport. It was you having to kind of reflect on what adjustments that you needed to do. And that brings us to the part of the story in 2022. You had a health situation, and I want you to kind of illustrate that for the audience, and how that next hurdle kind of set up how you started the process of going even further in training your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best place I can start with outlining this is around 2018 was the last time I'd stepped on the platform and competed. And around that time, I started getting a lot of inflammation issues, a lot of pain. There's a couple of days that stand out in my mind where I physically couldn't move my legs to get out of bed. It took me like an hour to literally get onto the floor. It was not a good time. And I'd had injuries before. Stuff happens when you're pushing really hard for a sport, especially, when you're a reckless teenager and maybe doing stuff you shouldn't be doing. Stuff happens, right? You strain a muscle, you tweak your back, you do the rehab, you go to physio, you get some massage, whatever it may be. And there's sort of a trajectory that you can take where you do it enough times where it feels like you know what to expect. And this felt very different in that I'd done all of the things that I would normally do to get over an injury. And 2018 had come and gone. 2019 had come and gone. And I was trying so hard to find the answers and just couldn't. And over the next 4 years, basically, I continued along the way with trying to find more answers. And so talking with more specialist people, talking with sports medicine doctors, eventually getting connected with my rheumatologist, or now rheumatologist, and got basically a diagnosis that, hey, this is an inflammatory disorder that has to do with your autoimmune system. It's nothing related to lifting. It's not like you deadlifted too much weight and now your immune system is compromised. It's just a genetic thing. And to illustrate like just how bad this was, I was taking, under doctor's orders, about 6 to 8 Tylenols a day, plus some other prescription, like industrial strength Aleve, if you want to think about it that way, just to get to a point where I could focus enough to work through the day. And even then, like, I couldn't stand for most of the day, or I couldn't sit, or it was just a bit of a mess. And my workouts definitely weren't as great as they could be. But I don't know, just deep down, I felt like there had to be something in there. Like, I just wasn't willing to give up on that thing that had literally transformed my life and given me a career, given me what feels like a purpose outside of my work as well. And so kept looking for that answer and trying to find, okay, how can I get out of this? And well, by the time I'd gotten the diagnosis, it was relieving to know, hey, okay, this is what's going on, because for 4 years I'd had no answers and it was just guesses. And that also set in course a treatment plan where it said, okay, well, you're probably never going to be able to squat and deadlift again with the competition style, with a back squat and a barbell deadlift. And those are my favorite lifts, which kind of hurt. It took me a while to really get over that. But at the same time, it said, hey, it's not that there's something inherently wrong with these movements. You're not doing anything wrong. Find what you can do. And so, like, at this point, I can squat with a specialty bar. If any of your listeners are familiar with a safety bar, it's just a different shape of barbell that positions the load a little bit differently, that still lets me squat fairly heavy. And at this point, I'm gearing up to hit the national Canadian bench record in the next couple of years if things go well. And ultimately, the biggest impact now with having a treatment plan in place and being able to manage it is, while that dream of back squatting 500 pounds is kind of gone at this point, there's still an avenue for progression for me to pursue that, pursuit of strength, really, that's been so impactful for me.
Once again, listen, I'm Refocused Radio, talking to Matt Taylor, and man, this is a story, man. I'm glad you're on the show, because it's very encouraging that you mentioned that you're still doing some other things outside of training, like personally. You're still doing things that you yourself want to see yourself continue to do. And that takes a lot of courage. And also it's a little risk in there, because you're going through some things, so health wise, so you got to be very careful what you can and can't do. How were you able to work with your doctors, or just knowing your body personally, to kind of strategize what your limits would be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So with the inflammatory nature of things, at a nuts and bolts level, when you exercise, there's an inflammatory response that happens. And that's normal. That's how your body recovers. It's not bad. A lot of people want to demonize inflammation. It's a normal thing that's supposed to happen. It's just when it's chronic and it never shuts off is where you start to run into issues. And that's basically what I was dealing with when I wasn't on a good treatment plan. And so the really I suppose, fortunate thing is with managing this what I have, a lot of my daily and weekly and monthly practices are actually very conducive to managing it. So the things that make you good at powerlifting are incidentally a lot of the things that you would do to treat this. So managing your stress, eating a healthy diet, sleeping well. There's some supplementation and stuff you can do, like, omega-3 fatty acids to manage inflammation and things like that. And so I had all of those things in place already, which meant, okay, really the only thing that was missing was medication at this point, and just getting, taking my immune system from being on absolute overdrive to just break it down a little to kind of a normal baseline. And that's, the medication was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, where it allowed me to then resume, okay, well, I have a framework now to work with for training. And instead of every time I touch a weight, I'm just blowing myself up, I can now train and say, okay, well, what's the range of weights that I can work with? And what exercises work well? And what ranges of motion can I do? And so it's interesting in the sense where I look at how I have worked and how a lot of the coaches on my team have worked with people who've come in with a back injury, for example, right? And they said, hey, I want to get back to lifting heavy. I have this back injury. There's one lifter in mind I'm thinking of, and she did her first nationals a little over a year ago and actually got on the podium as her first national meet. But when she first came in, she had a back injury where it was like she could squat or deadlift once, but then she'd have to take a month off, And the approach there is very much the same as what I took when I was finally okay to start lifting heavy again. Was, okay, you know what? It's easier to do more tomorrow if you underdo it today, but it's a whole lot harder to overshoot and do damage control. And so with that type of approach, I said, okay, the risk reward of pushing an extra 5 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever it may be doesn't outweigh me just having a successful session and leaving some room to build. And I like to approach it from that bottoms up standpoint and saying, if I'm going to introduce anything new at this point, even if it's something I haven't done in a long time, start with something that is like a safe home base, and then gradually progress it over time, right? And listening to your body, this is something you can't really write in a book or tell somebody how to do it. It's something that's mindful. It's a mindful practice you have to develop over years of learning your own body. And I know there's stuff right now that I do that doesn't bother my back, or it doesn't bother my hips or my neck or my shoulders or whatever it may be, that would completely bother somebody else's with no autoimmune condition, and vice versa, right? But it's just sort of building that training menu, if you will, knowing, hey, this is kind of what we've got available right now. This is what's on tap, so to speak. And then from there, you have your base and you build. And just like with training, you set the foundation, you build on it, you try to raise that foundation and sort of build the next version of yourself. And then reassess, go back to the drawing board and take a look at, okay, what's working, what's sort of hit or miss, what's really not working. It feels like it's pushing me backwards. And powerlifting is really cool in that sense, where it's a very long project. And I mentioned it earlier, that pursuit of strength. It encompasses so many different aspects of your life that you have to approach it holistically. And as a result, it bleeds into a lot of areas of your life where if you're not managing your stress well, or you have something going on, and then you try to push really hard with powerlifting as well, instead of listening to your body and saying, hey, how can I make this work and still keep moving the needle, but maybe make some adjustments so that I'm not just adding stress on stress on stress on stress. It then lets you approach the rest of your life like that too, where you start to become, minded towards, I only have so much I can tolerate right now. How do I move the needle on everything that I'm really focused on with my lifting, with my business, with my mental health, with my relationships, and showing up for my spouse or my partner or my kids or my dog. And that's, I don't know if I've gone too far off track here, but that's how I look at things with sort of managing the whole picture.
No, you gave us an excellent picture, because the point you made about just kind of dialing in, dialing back based on self-awareness is what we comment here on the show with our guests, but self-awareness and what is my stress levels outside the gym in powerlifting, and what are my stress levels during powerlifting. But the key that I really like is if your personal life is out of whack, then you're almost putting yourself in more risk thinking that you can just power yourself through with the powerlifting, because I think that's an excellent point. You're putting yourself at more risk, not just mentally, but physically, if your personal life is kind of not in alignment. And I like what you said about adjusting your framework on both ends, because only you can really put your analysis on how you feel with your body. And you can read books, like you said, or listen to a doctor, but they're not you. At the end of the day, you know your threshold. And that leads me to the next question. What are some of the lessons that you learned with your experience with powerlifting that go beyond the gym that you help with your clients today?
Yeah. It goes back to that stress management and looking at your life outside the gym as well, of control what you can control, right? There's some things with lifting where you're not going to be able to change it. Like, I can't change if I had a crazy week of work and I got 3 projects sprung on me, or I don't have kids, but somebody who has kids, you're probably not going to be able to change if your kids get sick and they're home from school and you got to take care of them, stuff like that. And there's a fine line to walk with lifting between having it be a therapy for you and like, this is like my escape, this is my me time, I can go push, and it's this, lifting is the thing that I can control, and getting carried away with that where you're just doubling down on everything. And like I mentioned, it's a fine line to walk. Some people will do better with, hey, my life is super stressful right now. What I feel like I need is to just really focus in on my training, with the understanding that I'm probably not going to recover as well as I could if I had super low stress outside the gym. But if that's not something you can change, that's okay. Adjust your training plan to meet that. And going back to that training, it is the thing you can control. And having that piece where I know that I could have the best day, I could have the worst day. But when I close my laptop at the end of the day, I'm going to show up to the gym, and that's the thing I can control. I can control everything that I put into that session. And knowing that that exists, and even if the entire day is curveball after curveball, things that I'm not going to be able to change, and kind of sucks to feel that powerless sometimes, but it's the reality for some people or some situations. Knowing that I'm going to have 60 minutes, 75 minutes, 90 minutes, however long that session is, to just go and work on me in an environment I can control and manipulate those details to help me take sort of the next level on my own little side quest here. If nothing else, it's just a nice reset button on everything.
You listen on Refocused Radio and watching us online, and talking to our special guest, Matt Taylor. This interview, man, I'm putting on, there's a page on the website that we put out for 2025. It's basically like simple exercising, like just mindfulness for those who just want to focus on being consistent in 2025. It doesn't matter how little you do. All that matters is that you just try to show up as often as you can, because life happens. Like you said, life always has a sense of humor, because when you're doing great, boom, here comes some thunder and lightning and some curveballs. No more fastballs for you, buddy. But you have to push and just be yourself. And what I'm trying to say, land the plane, is I want to put this episode on that article, because we might have to talk afterwards, because what I really appreciate about your story is the details. Because it's not just a bland, generic stamp of, fitness and goals and, the cliches that you kind of hear sometimes. This is a very deep, meaningful dive into someone who had some health challenges, but that challenge, or those challenges, did not end your progress. It did not end what your overall goal was for your fitness lifestyle. Because I believe that's what it is. Kind of explain to the audience, quick couple questions. First is those who are new to powerlifting, what are some wisdom advice that you will share to help build their confidence level? And the second part of that, I'll get after you answer.
Yeah. My best advice with powerlifting training is focusing more on the process and the goal. And what I mean by that is the goal with powerlifting, especially in a competitive context, is 1 rep max. So the most you can do one time in a squat, a bench press, and a deadlift. And naturally, what will happen is people will gravitate towards that means I have to go very heavy and test my limits every session. And that kind of works when you're a beginner because you're just like learning how to do it in the first place. You're just getting better at doing it. You're not actually getting stronger per se. You're just becoming more efficient. But very quickly, what's going to happen is you're either going to get injured or you're going to get burnt out. And if you focus instead on saying, okay, my goal is this, and I'm going to build towards that, that makes such a tremendous difference with everybody from a beginner to an advanced athlete who's been lifting for a decade. In that it allows you to cultivate momentum. It allows you to know, hey, I probably need to be a little more focused in at this time point or this period, but it's not this onslaught of a huge burden that's now on you where it's like, I have to be at 100% 5 days a week. Every single time I show up to the gym, it's war, right? And if you can approach it with that, where it's just, I'm here for the ride. I'm going to ride the wave and I'm going to build the wave to a nice big swell, hit a nice little set of progressions, let that wave crash, build to the next one, build a little bit of bigger wave. Personally, I found it to be just mentally so much more sustainable. And it's kind of fun because you can go for this build, find those new heights, and then take a moment to reset, recenter, and say, okay, what's next? What worked? How do I get to that next step? And then try it out. And it takes a bit of the pressure off that way.
So I'm gonna have like 3 or 4 more questions, but let me get to a follow-up question. Someone who might be nervous after an injury, they nurse it, they get better, they get healthier, but they just have that thing in the back of their mind, like, okay, I don't want to cause this again. What's your professional advice based on knowing your own body throughout the years, being this professional lifestyle? What's some techniques that they can do to slowly push themselves without overdoing it?
Yeah. So I've got a great example actually of a lifter I've worked with who's done that, where there was a lot of fear and guarding around it. It's actually one of my best friends, Chad. So when we first started actually working together, he'd injured his back. He had a lot of sciatica, like L5-S1 issues. And he was squatting maybe about 300 pounds at the time. And obviously couldn't after he'd injured his back. Had gone through the rehab process, came back, and on paper, he should have been fine. But every time he got near that 300 pounds, you could see it. Like he got nervous. He would miss some reps because he'd be thinking about it instead of in his body and focusing on what he needed to do to succeed. He'd be worried about what happens if I fail. And there was really 2 things that we did that I think made the biggest impact. The first was at a physical level. Spending most of your time training in that 75 to 85% zone is where you get stronger. Training at 100% is where you test where you're at. You actually get stronger 75 to 85%. So for him, that's sort of when he was squatting 300, 225 to 255 was where we actually spent most of our time. And we got him real good at lifting that to the point where he was doing even 255, 265, 275 for a lot of reps. And if you map out the projection on what he was doing at 255 for reps, he was estimated to be 320, 330, 340 pounds. And this is a guy who's now squatted 465 pounds, right? So over 150%. But at the time we said, hey, like look on paper, like statistically, you are strong enough. There's no reason why you can't squat 300s at a physical level. You're there. The second thing we did was started to implement positive mental imagery. And there's a book that I really like called With Winning in Mind. I forget the author, but if anybody's having trouble with like the mental side of things, I love that book for that. It's a very short book as well. So shout out to the author. I wish I could remember your name. But basically the way that it's structured is all you're going to do is a few times a week, you're going to set aside 3 to 5 minutes and you're going to create a mental movie. And in that mental movie, you're going to visualize you doing your desired outcome. Now, your goal isn't to make some fantasy tale where it's unrealistic and you're squatting 1,500 pounds, right? It's like, just go to the next step. What's the goal you're actually trying to work on? Okay, well, I want to be squatting 300 pounds confidently. Cool. Okay. So let's say doing something 5 times is probably confident. Okay. I said, all right, I want you to visualize yourself doing 300 pounds 5 times. And what you're going to do is you're going to create the image from the moment you set up and you're kind of starting to approach the bar. Look at the plates. How many plates are on the bar? What does the bar feel like when you touch it? Where does it sit on your back? How does it feel in your hands? What sounds do you feel? What physical sensations do you feel? What are the cues that you go through? And the goal is creating this full, Peter Jackson cinematic masterpiece in your head of exactly what that perfect set feels like that's successful. And so then by the time you actually get to going and doing it in real life, you've done it 10,000 times in your head. And the real key to this positive mental imagery is when you find yourself tripping up. There will be a point where you're like, let's say with Chad, right? He's setting up under the bar for this squat in his mental movie, and he takes that first step back, and then he notices his mind's just like, oh, I'm not sure if I took the step back the right way. I feel like my back might tighten up on me, or I can visualize my back potentially tightening up on the third. Stop. Don't go any further in that movie. Just reset, go back to the start, and build forwards again. And get to that point where you can keep focusing on what you need to do, positively succeed, as opposed to what you need to avoid, where you're trying to pull away from failures on your mind. And it'll be frustrating the first few times you do it because it'll feel like that movie's about 3 seconds long. But as you build towards that full feature length film, you'll find that when it's time to go squat that 300 pounds for 5, you're like, okay, cool. I know exactly what I need to do. There's no surprises here. I just need to go do it. The only thing I haven't done is the physical. Everything else is done.
I love that, man, because I can agree more. You can't jump scenes. So you can't start the climax on the opening scene.
Yeah. Everyone's focused on the climax.
Because that's what makes movies great, is when you cheer on the person who has their struggles and adversity, and before you know it, they shock themselves or the world, and they beat everything against all odds. I think that's what makes not just movies great, but stories. I mean, look at yourself, your story. Once again, listen, our folks are watching us online, talking to our guest, Matt Taylor. Go to his website, strongerupt.com, but it's just look at your own story. You face adversities, you face times where it's like, okay, wow, this is definitely a setback. And you still push. You still press, even when you could have said, you know what, I'm retired. Let me write books or something. Let me do something else. But I admire that. And I think that's what makes people great, and goes back, circling to the top of the show today, how powerlifting can truly help you find your strongest self. I think what you help illustrate through the episode is that the strongest part of you is understanding you. Because if you fail at that, whatever your plans you think you have for powerlifting, it might go AWOL. It may not even work out. And I love the movie perspective, imagining, visualizing what it is you're trying to do and accomplish, and doing it scene by scene versus trying to skip steps and trying to have some non-realistic vision of what you can do. It's not saying that you couldn't do it, but it's work within the margins that actually kind of makes sense based on your situation and where you are on the map, is what they say. Because if you don't know where you are on the map, then you end up anywhere, and that's not a way to navigate life. So first and foremost, I want to say thanks for Matt being on. But before we close, what are some of the things that our listeners and our viewers can expect for you in the future? And if you're open to working with new clients or just consulting, what's the best way people can connect with you?
Yeah. So in the future, watch out for me on the platform. Hoping to get back there this year. So things go well and keep going the way they have been. I'm very excited to do that. In terms of if they want to connect, I think the best way that we could do it is I'm on Instagram. I post a lot on just some information on how to get into the sport of powerlifting. how to hit those next sets of PRs and do it all with less than 5 hours a week in the gym. And I've also recently made what I call a first meet guide. And so I pulled data from about 3,000 powerlifters from last year to show you, hey, if you want to be competitive in your first powerlifting meet, how strong do you actually need to be? And where the heck do you even go to find those competitions that are local to you? So if it's all right with you, I could send you the link for it, and you could keep it in the show notes or something like that, and they can connect with me that way as well. I'd be happy to send them the resource.
Yeah, we'll do even one better. We'll write a blog post about this as well. So we'll look for those links so we can put in the description, show notes. But man, we might have to have you on again later in the year. And like I said, I'm going to have to talk to you later because I think I have some ideas of how we can maybe do a collab. But once again, I want to say thank you to you, Matt Taylor, for your time.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. Appreciate the opportunity.